Greetings, comrade. I am known as Comrade Dmitri, broadcasting live from some rundown Soviet ghetto in the middle of nowhere in Siberia. Today we will be responding to this video by Godless Cranium and his friend Kaitlyn Chloe. The video is called "The Power of What a Battery is Strong with This One" with Kaitlyn Chloe. This was a response that they did to Mr. Brass's response to Kaitlyn Chloe when she was on the Non Sequitur show discussing about discussing, I forget with who that guy was, but they were discussing and they got into religion, and she started to explain why she believes religion is harmful and whatnot. And so Mr. Brass made a video response to that, to what she was saying in her on that video, and then she and Godless Cranium made a response here. So we're gonna take this probably minute by minute. So let's begin, shall we? You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's do this.
I think it's just funny when Godless Cranium make response videos that their followers just come in droves and flood the downvotes of the original video.
Yeah, I figure this is probably going to get maybe a response, or at the very least, it's going to get a bunch of downvotes. But it is what it is. And what I was about to say was that I was going to let you two mostly respond, and I'll chime in, of course, and I'll provide links for everything for what I say below when I respond to them, and I'll do the same for Brass and Engine. So let's begin, shall we? You guys ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's go.
I wanted to address a video by Red Pill Religion Control. Here's what she originally had to say.
Indoctrinated. It didn't happen. It leads to, and I think that there are a lot of ways is this religious mindset.
So anyhow, I thought that I didn't. They see the same views when it comes to anti-theism.
Hi, me on your channel to respond to this mess. I also want to thank Terrace, a friend of mine.
All right, so let's stop there. What do you guys have to say in response to
that? There's not really much to say. They didn't really get into anything much yet.
Oh, I was gonna say, okay. Yeah, I figured I probably should go longer. Sorry, this is my first time, or not my first time, but I'm still getting used to being a host. So I just figured because she called your video a mess.
I will say this though. I will say this though. At least I draw my own. At least I draw my own shitty drawings. She has to outsource that job to someone else.
Yeah. Look at this mess. Look at the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, I was gonna say she's trying to be like you here with that drawing, and how you have your drawing. But I guess this is really non-issue. So let's continue.
Who did my avatar for this video, and it felt weird being the only person avatar, so I went ahead and asked if she would create one for me, and she did. It's nice for that.
Now, with that out of the way, go into for one, the negativity of indoctrination has to be shown, not taken as axiomatic.
We have gotten over the years in our inbox of how hard to thousands of news stories about mental and physical treatment, sexual repression, rape, molestation, homicide, inequality, being deprived of education, being deprived of social interaction, being deprived of medical treatment. There are examples we know of in religious households and communities.
All right, so should we stop here?
Atheists have never done any of that?
Well, yeah, that and like a lot of these things, it's kind of hard to explain. But a lot of what she's saying here are like these rare examples. I mean, she talks about sexual repression. Well, I know many studies that that suggest that Christians, devout Christians, actually have a lot of good sex, and I'll link them too. Believe it or not. Russ, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I mean, here's the thing. So, instead of appealing to any scientific studies on that statement, what she appeals to is two things: news stories and anecdotal evidence that she gets from her fan base.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
So, I mean, and here's the thing about it: like, we can go back and forth with it. The whole like people send emails to each other about things. It doesn't mean that they're a representative study of enough people. Like, hell, I mean, I'm sure if China actually allowed a lot of its citizens to actually send emails a lot and be more active about that, and not to talk criticize their government, like, you know, because they're prevented from criticizing their government, really. I bet we could see a lot of them saying some bad shit about, you know, how their atheistic government is oppressing people. And I mean, imagine if we, you know, if the religious people there were more allowed to talk out about that, I'm sure I could probably get an inbox full of that. So, I mean, if we're going to go anecdotal by anecdotal basis, for every three anecdotal claims you can make, I can back up with 10.
And sure. she's just speaking about fundamentalist households, extremist households.
And another thing is, like, you know, I don't deny that there are bad religious people. In fact, you know, and that's sort of stupid how they Godless Cranium strawmans me from the very get-go with the thumbnail by saying, you know, religion didn't do nothing, because that was never a claim I made once in the entire video. I mean, there's so many religious people in this world that there is bound to be at least a good handful of stupid religious people that do stupid things for their religious reasons.
Basically,
it's just a matter. It's a matter of statistics. It's a matter of statistics.
They're judging religion based on its radicals. In other words,
yeah. I mean, I know, and you know, it's stupid. Like, unless you can, like, you know, we can go back and forth, and you know, you quote one person that's been hurt by religion, I can quote one that's been hurt by militant atheism. So we can go back and forth on that, and we can. I can argue that
nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I think here's what she would probably say to that, and I've heard her respond to this. She says, "Well, the difference between that religion and atheism is that when atheists do it, you know, that was state atheism, in other words, and I'm losing my train of thought."
She will not
I always find it funny. It's like they have like this progressive liberal narrative where, you know, a liberal can pretty much construct an entire narrative around a definition, and they will defend that definition to the death. And this definition just so happens to be something that is unquestionable and can never fail. And if it does fail, then it really wasn't that definition. It's like with people that say, I mean, it's like this. It's like people that say, oh, Stalin's communism wasn't real communism. You know, if we, you know, or, you know, Venezuela's not real socialism or something like that. It's because they have defined words in such a way where they cannot fail. There cannot be a counterexample.
And keep their ideology blameless. They want to have their cake and eat it too.
So, I mean, and the thing about atheists is like, yeah, atheists can never be wrong because they never make any truth claims about them that result to anything.
Right.
A person that merely shuts their mouth.
Except that they're the rational ones.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm just saying, like, you know, a man who's mute can't make any truth claims because he can't make any claims at all. So, I mean,
I guess exactly. The problem here is that she's taking these like really extreme examples. Like, for example, like I know about like the Protestant faith healers, you know, who indirectly kill their children because, you know, they chose to like pray instead of taking their children to the right. And that's actually kind of I guess you could say heretical to how historically Christianity's been, because the Catholic Church, for example, has a huge history of funding doctors and medicine and whatnot, and they would never say in like the Middle Ages, "Oh, go take your, pray over going to the hospital." That's purely a kind of 20th century Protestant heresy.
Well, in all fairness, in the Middle Ages, most doctors didn't even know what the hell they were doing.
Well, actually, no. We can. I mean, obviously they weren't like up to date like we were, but they weren't stupid either.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. They were experimenting and coming to.
It's whenever you start a new project, you're going to have to go through a couple clunkers first before you get better at it.
Right, and that's how it was. That's how it was historically in Christendom and the Islamic world too. I mean, they had interesting science or medicine too. And yeah, that's just my issue, is that she's taking a lot of these like really extreme examples and assigning religion to be like the ultimate cause for it. And
basically,
sure, there are,
here's how it really goes. But she defines religion, and her and her man define religion in the same way Christopher Hitchens defines it. Religion is anything that I dislike, and everything that I do like is atheism.
Right, communism is a religion, and fascism is a religion too.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's just complete bullshit definition game.
Right, and I definitely agree with that. There are certain religious groups out there that are not the best, at all. But at the same time, I don't think we can just turn a blind eye to all the good religion has done. Now, that's going to come up later here in this video, and
that'll destroy their narrative, though.
Well, I mean, here's what they'll also say is like, because this is a typical argument that goes up, is like any good thing religion can do, secularism can replace it. I say a lot of problems that we have currently with religion is because of secularism.
I was going to say religious fundamentalism is in many ways a response to secularism. Religious fundamentalism, as we think of it, is, like I said, almost an invention of the 20th century. So.
Yeah, and another thing is like, it's just stupid overall. Like, what they, it's like, for example, secularism, you can blame for a lot of terrorist attacks because, like, in secular countries, because a lot of these religious people there feel marginalized by the secular states there. And when you get a group that feels marginalized and you start making fun of them, then yeah, they're going to break out against you. And a lot of terrorist attacks can be attributed to that.
Exactly, and that's very fascinating you mentioned that, because I study totalitarian mass movements, and what I find in my personal research throughout history is that whenever, like, regardless of the revolution, the Russian Revolution, the German Nazis, or a lot of these like ISIS, these radical jihadist groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda, is that it always starts out with a mass movement of unemployed men. That's true in all these cases. Now, what's interesting is that they would say, well, ISIS and Al Qaeda, they're religious. Well, I guess okay, but I don't view religion as being any kind of religious atrocity, as being any kind of unity compared to a secular atrocity.
Well, we've already had many studies when it comes to terrorism and saying that the link between religiosity and terrorism isn't that strong.
That's true.
It more has to do with being a part of an action-oriented ideology. The fact that some religious people have it is more of an akin to the ideology more than it is to religion itself.
Well, I've heard there's actually studies that show the kind of people who become like Islamic terrorists are the ones more likely not to go to mosque and not to really consider religion a valuable part of their daily life. And so it's like, I think it was Daniel Pipes or someone like that. He once coined a term called sudden jihad syndrome. So like you get all these like the Zarnaya brothers, the little one, he wasn't religious. In fact, he was mostly on the jacking off the porn. And then along with his brother, they suddenly became, they had an urge to join the Islamic fight for jihad, and as a result, they went on to commit their terrorism. And I don't think that you can solely blame that on religion in any way, especially considering the studies. So yeah, anyone else got anyone else got anything to say?
I think we should move on.
Studied in psychology. Many below. And you commonly of how specifically can be harmful. Christianity teaches children that evil, even before they ever did anything wrong, just by being born and alive, psychologically damaging to children. Second, it sets children up for a lifetime of self-abuse and loathing. Those who accept Jesus are good, bad. There's non-believers, wherein children learn that non-believers are inherently bad and that believers are somehow superior to them, other people, and bigotry based on belief differences. Christian, it isn't. It's completely natural. Around sex is incredible. Children who learn to repress natural.
All right, you guys got a response to that?
Yeah, she commits a naturalistic fallacy. She says because masturbation is natural, therefore it is good. That's a naturalistic fallacy. That's because forced copulation, aka rape, is completely natural. Almost every species, like almost every kind of animal we can think of, does it to a degree. Like sharks, many species of bugs. So rape, aka forced copulation, is very natural. But I bet if I told Kaitlyn this, she would not be pressed to say that. Therefore, it is good.
Right.
And besides, we already got secular sources like at NoFap, who are, they're secular and they go into why, masturbation can be harmful. Now, personally, I don't think masturbation is, I think masturbation in of itself is not harmful, but I think that overdoing it can be harmful.
Cannibalism is also natural.
It's sort of like, it's like, I really think of I think of it like, I say, masturbation is like, overdoing anything can really be harmful. So, drinking too much water can kill you. So, I would find masturbation to be somewhat in the same category, where I can imagine if someone's just a casual person that just does it on like once or twice a day, they're perfectly fine. But if it becomes a part of your life, that can really mess you up. And could give you unrealistic expectations and make it harder for you to deal in relationships with people.
Well, but she would still say that.
So to say it's without its flaw, to say it's without its negatives is kind of disingenuous by her.
Well, cannibalism is also
exactly
natural in many species.
Well, yeah, that's true too. Yeah, many species like Tasmanian devils, I believe, do a form of cannibalism.
Well, here's the thing.
That's. Well, I mean, they eat the dead. They don't have to be part of the species. All right, you go.
Okay. What she's saying is that there are Christian, the Christian denominations that view sex as sinful, and therefore, are they can condemn like teenagers and whatnot for masturbating and whatnot. What would you guys say in response to that? That's what she's saying.
I mean,
respond to what?
Here's the thing with her. She said, Christianity teaches that, people are intrinsically evil, which that's an interpretation that I grant you, but it also teaches you that, while you are fallen, God still loves you. You are under the loving care of a God that loves you despite your flaws.
Yeah, but what's is that more dehumanizing than you thinking you're just insignificant specks of dust in an uncaring universe filled with random tragedy where nothing means anything?
Yeah, I go like this. I always say this. I said, really, what is more dehumanizing on a real level? That you are under the loving care of a God that loves you despite all your flaws? Or the view that you are just an insignificant speck of dust no more significant than any other animal on a bigger speck of dust circling around a mindless universe doomed to perish individually and collectively as a species in a relatively short amount of time. I really don't think we can have a contest about which one's more dehumanizing than that. Like on the atheistic worldview, unless you appeal to speciesism, you can't really objectively say that humans are any more objectively valuable than a cockroach.
And killing another human is no more significant than swatting a bothersome fly.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess
if we're gonna play that.
Oh, and on an atheistic worldview, I mean, well, not, there are atheists that believe in objective morality, so let me just, quit my tongue on that. But I will say, like, at least a majority of atheists I know online, with a few exceptions, do take the view that morality is ultimately subjective, so at least even with the fundamentalist interpretation that humans are intrinsically evil, at least it teaches you that there is such a thing as good and evil.
Here is
on atheistic worldview, at best you could get there is pleasurable and there is non-pleasurable.
Well,
which is completely subjective. All right, you go, Comrade Dimitri.
Let me get my thought out. I guess my problem here is that she's ranting about like Christian groups that are like really, really quote unquote sexually repressive and are anti-masturbation and whatnot. But what I don't think she realizes is that there's a ton of sociological research that suggests societies that are more quote unquote sexually repressed, i.e., they're more they have more conservative attitudes about sex and sexuality and that all that kind of stuff, that they tend to be much more successful as societies. J.D. Unwin, he looked at some like 3,000 societies across 10,000 years, and he found that societies that were more quote unquote sexually restrained were far better and were far more successful and whatnot. And many of them were empires even. So yeah, I'm definitely against those kind of like Protestant puritanical type of fundies out there, but at the same time, I also don't think we should be like total sexual hedonists. They would of course say that I'm referring to whataboutism here, but I guess it is what it is. I mean, I don't think that any kind of religious wrongdoing is that more significantly unique than non-religious or irreligious wrongdoing. So,
and a lot of her claims seems to not even really be religious exclusive problems, because a lot of this tends to be just in and out group problems, and which is sad enough. It's secular. Because I have known it myself to happen where, just for the mere fact of being a deist, I've been kicked out, or at the very least made fun of in atheist groups. So there does seem to be an in and out. If we're going to do the whole psychology thing, we can clearly say this is merely just in and out group behavior. And even Phil Zuckerman, their go-to guy, admits that there is times in more secular universities where religious people feel like they're being degraded.
Right, and who was that guy? Was it Sigmund Freud, who was like, he was really anti-sex and anti-sexuality because he believed it was like a bestial practice, and he was an atheist, but I don't know.
No, that might have been Nietzsche.
Nietzsche? I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. Like I said, I already made my point with mentioning J.D. Unwin and his view on human sexuality and civilization. So let's move on here. Ready? You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay.
This can have long-term negative psychological in regards to the and damage future relationships they have. That religion also provides comfort, kindness, and unelusive to religion, just as easily be pro or.
You guys want to respond to that? Or?
Well, I mean, yeah, I've sort of responded to it before where I just said, like, they use this argument all the time. It's a shitty argument because, like, they say that anything good religion can do can be replaced by secularism, but they never seem to take the opposite point of view that anything bad that religion can do, secularism can do too. And it has frequently, we know in the past, done much worse.
Video's just fading out on my end. I barely got what she was saying.
Really? You did? Well,
it is.
Oh, go ahead, Brass.
Do what?
It is a bit choppy.
You were going to say...
You're going out too?
Well, I'm kind of slow. I need to get a new one, so... I was going to say something about that.
What did she say?
I forgot. What'd you say, Brass?
I just said yes, the video's a bit choppy on my end.
No, I mean, Engine asked what Kaitlyn Chloe said.
I know that. I said the video is choppy on my end. It's, it fades in and out.
Well, unfortunately, there isn't much I can... My computer's, like, really old. So I guess we'll just have to move on here.
What did she say though?
Follows a specific ration.
She basically said that anything religion can provide for children, quote unquote secularism or humanism or secular humanism can provide the same.
And I mean, I'm always doubtful for this because, on one hand, they say that secularism can provide all these things and atheism can provide all these things. But on the other hand, they say there is nothing to atheism. It's just a lack of belief. How can you get anything good or bad out of a lack of something?
They sure go out of their way to promote their lack of belief.
Exactly. Yeah, and I guess my problem is too. I kind of agree with you, Mr. Brass, is that they never show the opposite. Anything good that religion can provide, quote unquote secularism or secular humanism or whatever, can provide as well. But it's also the same way.
You couldn't say that a few decades ago.
Exactly. I mean, that was a different time.
Anti-theists are just like the foundations that Christians built. Anti-theists are just leeching off of.
Language there because,
for lack of a better word,
I guess. So let's continue.
You clearly don't know what you're talking about, Brass. Fortunately, the 12-step program was first developed in the 1930s, and Dr. Bob Smith, both of whom were very religious. Their and originally contained religious material. However, as Kaitlyn just program that is a more shittery, it was originally embedded. Have chosen to alter the 12-step program so that it can serve original principle and take past actions, while the same that originally came along with it.
Casey,
you guys got a response?
Well, yeah, the dude's a fucking idiot because he didn't get what I was saying. It was, I made no all I was saying is like programs like the 12-step program, like whether they, it has nothing to do whether it's a religious or secular program in of itself. To me, I doubt what the whole the efficiency of the 12-step program in general, whether it is secular or religious, because there's a mixed bag with results with it, but. I wasn't saying anything like, all I was making the point is that no matter what program you do, you're going to have to result to follow a plan that you can't really question, because if you question, that will create turmoil, which will make it harder for you to recover. You sort of have to accept the plan and like take control of, like, even like with a more secular 12-step program where they'll say you have to take control of your life, you know, like that. You have to take control of your life. You have to believe that. You can't really question that thing because you have to just sort of take it as an axiom in order to get by. Because a lot of these groups rely just generally on intersubjective relations, which makes them hard to assess it makes it hard to assess whether it's the program that's making them successful or it's the fact that they're just in a group talking to people.
Right. Better? Just
So, I mean, I doubt like the whole effectiveness of, you know, the 12-step program in of itself. It's a mixed bag. It sort of just works for who it works for. There's some people that come out better for it. There's some people that don't.
Right.
And there's just some people that has no effect on.
Right. And what they're saying here is that, again, it goes back to kind of the secular narrative that anything religion can provide, they can provide just as much, if not better. You know, as Godless Cranium said, you know, the quote-unquote religious horseshittery. So
again, you can only say that recently.
Yeah, and the whole you know, the whole thing is that the whole secularism can replace anything religion can do. It's sort of just like an axiom you have to take. It's not the matter of can you do it, but will it be as effective? I mean, I can say I can replace all the tires on your car with the tires I have, which is true. I can easily give you tires, but is the tires that you're going to give effective and it's going to last? You know, so I mean, that's how I put it. And we find a lot of problems that we know of with religion can also be attributed somewhat to secular societies. Like, for example, with the United States, a big thing that many people wanted, both atheist and religious people, wanted to try to secularize the Middle East. That was a big goal they wanted to push for. They wanted to secularize the Middle East. Well, they tried that multiple times, and guess what happened every time they did that? The religious people there felt like they were being marginalized and that their culture was being attacked. And in response to that, more fundamentalism came out of that. And now the situation is infinitely more worse.
Right. They would probably, if they make a response to this, they'll probably say, "Oh, why are you guys talking about, you know, Middle Eastern American foreign policy in the Middle East?" And
anyway, Pig Swellbucket says, "I feel like playing only the audio on your end could help the video not lag as much when you play it."
The audio? What do you mean?
I don't know. He says, I feel like playing only the audio on your end could help the video not lag as much when you play it.
Oh,
I don't know what he's saying.
Screen sharing?
Maybe next time what you can just do is download the video and see if that works.
Right, because I do have a rather dated computer, and I, you know, definitely need to save up to get a new one. So,
or just steal one, whatever one works. Now, I would never advocate stealing, wink.
He says, unless the visuals of Cranium's video are necessary.
There's nothing very visually interesting about Cranium's videos. It's basically 2 default pictures. At least I go through the effort of making a new picture every video. Well, almost every video.
Well, I just figured that, just because, you know, whatever. Without screen sharing, or... Hello? You guys...
So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you can just play the audio without screen sharing the video. I don't know.
Okay, we'll try it that way, and if not, then if it doesn't work, we'll go back to the normal. Okay. Hold on. Stop screen sharing. Okay. So let's respond.
All right.
A lot of deal with unshakable axioms. Perhaps under
unshakable axioms I'm talking about. To people who possess critical thinking axioms because of the evidence that supports them. Generally accepted, demonstrated to be true time and accepted principle is a rigorous scientific process. We learn that we were. This is not the case for theism. There is no presupposed. Religious people generally speak taught through the.
All right, you guys want to respond to that?
Basically, this goes into the whole, faith is just a belief without evidence, yada, yada, yada. At this point, any atheist that spouts this garbage is retarded in my book. They have never once read any commentary. They have never learned anything about pistis or amen. They really have no business criticizing religion because they have no fucking idea what they're talking about.
She insinuate that she is a critical thinker.
Well,
by the way, come in better.
Yeah, I could say, I imagine that's not a problem for critical thinkers. Sorry, you and Godless Cranium aren't one of those critical thinkers.
If you're an anti-Christian fanatic and a Christ mither and think Hitler was a Christian and all that other shit, you are not a critical thinker by any stretch of the imagination.
You are a fucking ideologue. That's all you are. That will be what all you will ever be.
I'm
Live
sorry,
it and come out with it.
I'm sorry, little girl, but you're in no position to patronize anybody.
Yeah.
From here, too, from kind of an Enlightenment view of what that's a relatively new definition of faith and how they considered it. I mean, before the Enlightenment meant your civic duties and your responsibility to your family and whatnot. Steve Turley, who Max, interviews a lot, he talks about the definition or view of faith, and yeah, I guess what I was going to say too was that you guys should be careful because there is
faith is defined in Hebrews 11:1.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's how I'd say it. Like, she criticized my use of axioms, unshakable axioms. What I was meaning is like they come into the conversation, for one, like how they do here, where they are condescending as hell, and they make the presupposition that either your opponent is stupid and don't know what they're talking about and they're against science, therefore irrational, or they make some presupposition that religion is bullshit and merely just look to find evidence that confirms their bias. That is what I meant by unshakable axiom.
How did that come in? Did the audio come in better?
Not on my end.
Damn. Well, I guess it's better anyway just to, do it that way without screen sharing. So we're going to continue on. I got to get a new computer, so if you guys want to give me $500 each. All right, so I was going to say something about that too. Well, I guess not. I already said it, so I guess I just hate how she's like generalizing and said that, she said Christians don't critically think about stuff. I mean,
well, she's not a critical thinker anyway, so whatever, just move on.
Yeah, let's continue.
And or testing God is bad and will resolve consequences. Faith is belief in the absence of evidence, and that is the unshakable axiom.
Fucking moron.
Presupposition.
You guys want to respond?
But belief without evidence. No, it's defined in Hebrews 11:1. It's the convictions of things hoped for, the convictions of what is not seen. The substance convictions of those not seen.
Well, I mean, even that's not supposed to be a general definition of faith. That's supposed to be more like a layout of any faith, not just religious faith. And another thing that you have to note about it is, like, what was the things unseen is the future. That was the thing that's unseen. Pistis and Amun mean roughly the same thing. They mean loyalty. And loyalty is based on evidence. And if you actually read all of Hebrews 11, you find it deals with people who all had God firmly reveal himself in their lives, thus giving them evidence. And what the things unseen was that they knew that they put their trust in God, and they trusted that he would, even after their deaths, continue on making good promises for his people.
It's more trust. Right. The kind of faith she describes is kind of faith she describes as like more like fightyism.
That was what I was gonna say, is that she's kind of going by this Voltairean view of what faith is. So take that as you will. You guys want to move on?
Yeah.
Sure.
She is not that bright.
Well, be careful with your words, Injun. So.
I mean, she already loves Injun. They're best friends.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on.
Critical thinkers don't need assumptions. And when we don't, generally speaking, we don't know more about the scientific method. GC has included a link to a live science article, or you can look at any source. Literally thousands of sources, from basic kid-level explanation.
This will be a side rant, but I feel...
I checked out that source, and, there is no such thing as the scientific method. That, I have my own little study. It's called The Scientific Method as Myth and Ideal by Brian A. Woodcock, that shows, as touted as the scientific method is, it's a simple man's understanding. He and I quote, "On the contrary to the popular view, however, almost all modern historians and philosophers of the natural sciences would agree that there is no such thing as a single, unique scientific method. The whole idea that data trumps theory, that the process is mechanical and that individualistic objective, is a myth. Instead, scientists themselves think of a polarity of methods available as a toolbox for different purposes." So, exactly. Yeah, bitch, I know a little thing about science myself.
If I could get her to come onto my channel along with you, would you have a discussion or debate with her? No, not really?
No, I mean, for one, the only reason why I even did the response video in the first place was because I had the script more than 70% done, and I had the photos already ready. If I would have been any under that, I probably wouldn't have even made the video to begin with, because I despise them on every level, and I have made sure to block them and everything in order to get away from them.
Right, but we're kind of going after them right here, so.
All right, defense, I guess. Just let's play more.
All right. Do you have anything to say, Injun?
Just go on.
To attention that religious indoctrination isn't the only type of indoctrination.
Translation: I'm about to play an impressive game of whataboutery. While Kaitlyn is talking about one type of harmful indoctrination, Mr. Brass here is about to point towards a second type of indoctrination, even though it's not relevant to the discussion. It's not like we don't agree that other forms of indoctrination are bad, but that doesn't mean we can't point out and talk about this one specific form of indoctrination without talking about the others. It reminds me of an argument of Twitter recently. Here it is.
I just want a bad experience I have with when talking to ex-Christians is this constant need for them to bring up Christianity when we're talking. Yes, we know, we agree, Christianity is bullshit. Islam right now. It's like going into a cancer fundraiser and saying, but what about AIDS? Like, cancer.
As political.
Okay, what do you guys have to say in response to that?
What was that all
For
about?
one, Armin is arguably a worse source than Rational Wiki, which he got on me on the first video. So yeah, that's for one. And for two, like what I was doing there is like I said side rant. That was the first two words I said out of my mouth with it, and I said it's a side rant. I acknowledge that this isn't exactly what's, relevant to the discussion, and it could be different. I was merely bringing up the fact that there are other forms of indoctrination into this. I nowhere said that you could not focus on religious indoctrination, and you could not focus on, I didn't say you couldn't refer to either one. I was just bringing it up as a side issue.
Define indoctrination, because there's different definitions of it. Indoctrination originally meant to teach.
Yeah,
but then over time it's become synonymous with brainwashing.
And that's largely due to the rise of totalitarianism throughout the world.
Indoctrination, the act or process of forcing somebody to accept a particular belief or set of beliefs and not allowing them to consider any others.
I am not for that.
Yeah, I mean, define it. Like, there's even a lot of Catholic schools and stuff like that says, you can withdraw from their school if you don't, if you're not like a Catholic and you are a different set of Christian or whatever. So I mean, you could consider other viewpoints.
No, there should be no compulsion in faith whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, and also we have to distinguish between religious indoctrination and religious socialization.
Right, exactly.
The U.S. is, even if this is how I describe my experiences when I was a Christian, because religion was never really taught into my house. But because of the fact that, I grew up around a lot of religious people, and even though it wasn't really mentioned a lot, I still grew up somewhat religious merely because of the fact that the society I'm raised in happens to be religious. So I was socially religious. And it really required no indoctrination.
And this is my problem with the whole atheist definition, or what they imply by indoctrination, because let me give you a story. When I was in high school, I had a U.S. government teacher. I forget her name, but she basically said that how most families come to whether they're Republican or Democrat is not because the parents sit them down and say, look, we're Democrats and we hate those Republicans, or vice versa. It's because it starts out due to the conversations they are having about various social and political issues, and therefore the children hear that growing up, and usually they reflect what their parents are. And so if the conversations lean more kind of toward conservative politics and social issues, they'll be more likely to identify as Republicans. And same with the Democrats, or liberals and the Democratic Party. So yeah, I have a huge issue with how many atheists, what many atheists imply by quote unquote indoctrination, because even though I'm not a Christian anymore and I don't really go to church anymore, I grew up with in the church, and it was relatively okay. I mean, I'll admit I was socialized into it, but they would say that I was being indoctrinated into it, and that's from given the history of 20th century totalitarianism. So yeah. What do you guys have to say? Anything else you guys have to say? Oh?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, so should we move on?
Yep.
Right. Brass still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I was just wondering. You went quiet. Usually you're the more talkative one. So, all right, let's move on.
indoctrination is just as real of a thing. And with the election of Donald Trump, it is all to see parents indoctrinate their kids to be one specific rather than letting them figure it out for themselves.
When it comes to politics either. That doesn't address Kaitlyn's point about religious indoctrination, though. And political indoctrination doesn't necessarily come with the idea that an infallible, all-knowing, all-seeing God who can't be questioned said it either. I know when I was growing up, for example, no one told me that if I didn't align with a certain political party that I'd be tortured for eternity. She's basically saying, hey, indoctrination is bad and this is outcomes. And your idea of a debunk is, yeah, but political indoctrination is bad too. Anyhow, I'm going to...
No. I specifically said side rant. I knew that, it wasn't, I was just merely wanting to go on a side rant and talk about something different. That's something
here's the thing.
Because I felt like it made an important, I wanted my audience to know that there's more than just one form of indoctrination. For one, and I also wanted to see, I wanted to show that it's not unique to religion to indoctrinate.
Well, and what they're saying is true in only
I like Cranium. I'm gonna try to be as charitable as I can, and just correct them that hell is not torture, and I have no love for people who teach that to their kids.
Well, and that's the thing. What I was gonna say, that's true in some of the really Protestant fundy households out there. But here's the thing: I grew up as an evangelical, and they would teach about hell, but they didn't really, they weren't like fire and brimstone about it. They would just say, that's where bad people go, murderers and thieves and stuff like that. But again,
with me, for personally, like with my own experience about, hell really never even really got brought up, like neither did anything else really. But at best, all hell seemed like to me was just a prison system, pretty much. Like
right,
it was just a place where bad people went. Nothing more, nothing less, really.
That's exactly how it was for me.
I completely agree that there are bad religious people out there that do a lot of harm by telling their children that, like for example, like with Cosmic Skeptic, he said, about how he was raised to believe. Oh, I like him too, no doubt. But he says he still fears hell because of the religious abuse that he got when he was a kid. And I'm completely against that. I am all for, that being shunned against. To tell your children that, they're going to burn for an eternity in hell. But using specific examples of that happening is not really, that's like a guilt by association fallacy. When you're trying to use the worst examples to represent the whole of an idea.
That's what the anti-theist narrative thrives on.
Yeah.
Right, and another thing too, there was a study here that I'm referring to. I'll link it if I can. Well, I'll link it, yeah, definitely. But the study says here that U.S. children between ages 6 and 19 found positive correlations between physical and psychological health benefits and religious affiliation or church attendance. So, what are they talking about? When they're referring to burning in hell and stuff like that. Yeah, that's true in some cases, and I'm definitely against that kind of fire and brimstone fundies as well. But that's not the reality as a generality, generally speaking. Now, of course, they would say, well, anything religion can provide, we can do better. But I'm referring to their point here. And I guess, what do you guys have to say?
I lost my train of thought.
Same here, I do too, because it's like, what the fuck? I mean, the thing of it is that the way they view indoctrination is just simple socialization. That's my problem I have because historically that's not fared too well. So, you guys got anything else to say before we move on?
Just move on.
Yeah, move on.
What a buttery. And later on, I'm going to skip it. I don't want this video to end up being super long. But I urge you to go watch the original. As always, the link will be in the description box.
having a belief in God in of itself isn't really something you can be indoctrinated with, as it appears to be natural, as the books Justin Barrett's Born Belief, Why God Won't Go Away show. Religions like kids with the belief in God, but rather they are informing them about a belief they already have. I always put it like this: belief in God, but a belief in a particular religion often has.
We're not wired to believe in God. Our brains explain the unexplained and search for meaning. And when we can't explain the purpose in it, we tend to veer toward any kind of explanation possible for brains are biased in this way, but not to serve as a for adaptive and survival purposes. Multiple studies have shown that the area of the brain involved in deciphering people hear or talk about God or pray, but the same areas of the brain light up when one thinks about any special authority, your mom or dad. It also lights up when you consider other types of non-religious. Have also shown that neurologically speaking, the reason tales persist is that they are easier to remember because they are to understand. For more information.
All right, so what do you guys have to say?
Now she's going to pretend she's a science expert.
Yeah, I actually read some of the papers, and for example, she used the whole memory and mystery, the cultural selection of minimally counterintuitive narratives, where mentally counterintuitive is qualified as concepts that violate ontological expectations and intuitive theories of science, such as, ghosts that can walk through walls, frogs that can talk, etc. And here's some quotes that they put from the paper themselves. The Bible, for example, is a succession of mundane events interspersed with a few counterintuitive occurrences, such as miracles and appearances of angels. So they're saying, for example, the Bible is mostly mundane stuff with the occasional miracle in it. So, and here's another quote they say, finally, we emphasize that we do not claim that human memory was designed to favor MCI narratives such as the ones we observe in religious and mythical traditions. Quite the contrary, such narratives were most likely culturally selected because they successfully exploited the already existing cognitive architecture of the human memory system, which was naturally selected to solve adaptive problems that were quite unrelated to the propagation and cultural stabilization of counterintuitive narratives.
So what you're saying?
Memory is necessary but not sufficient in cultural selection of such narratives.
Even many atheists will tell you that we are hardwired to believe in a higher power. They just don't believe it, even if they don't believe it themselves. We are. Go ahead.
Well, they strawmanned me what I said. I did not say that God was hardwired into the brain. I said that belief in God was natural. That is not the same thing. What I was saying is that our brains are naturally designed, well, not designed because, on a naturalistic perspective, our brain is somewhat geared towards the belief in God. It has the propensity to believe. I'm not saying that God, I'm not saying that God is like a tumor that's been installed into your brain over time by evolution and it's an innate in that way. I'm just saying, we have a natural tendency to believe in God. That's what I mean by natural.
And this goes back 50,000 years. So in all that time, everybody had it wrong until the atheists came along.
And and here's what's funny. This is what D.V.A. Mathur, PhD, in his article "Religion: A Natural Phenomenon?" ? He said, by contrast, atheism is harder for the human brain to comprehend. Atheism is generally the result of deliberate effort against our natural cognitive dispositions, and thus a more difficult ideology to propagate. It is therefore not surprising that the appeal of logic and rationality that atheism offers has few takers. I am not saying that God is like a tumor in the skull that just naturally is like there. I'm saying that our minds are naturally geared towards a belief in God. Like, it has a propensity to believe in God.
Right, and another thing I was going to mention, and this is something that, God bless him, that annoying little fruitcake, RC Apologist, but RC Apologist sent me a study where they basically mentioned that atheists, like, their brain lights up when any mention of God is mentioned, and so it's like, I guess you could say that they secretly acknowledge God, which is kind of weird because Inspiring Philosophy, I think, also talked about this study too, and he said that he doesn't believe in like the old Norse gods or the old Greek gods, but he's not mad at them at any way, or he doesn't show any kind of emotion toward them, unlike many atheists. And another thing too is that even though I don't think that even though I think it's kind of controversial, and I'm not going to say one way or the other that whether or not God is hardwired in our brains, research has shown that genes do contribute to religious inclination because they're more meant to favor religiousness due to the fact that, for example, many societies, you notice that religious couples tend to have more children after overall compared to secular and atheist couples. So if you have like two communities, each have 1,000, one religious community and one secular community, and they each have 1,000 in like 2 decades, that the religious community would be like 30,000, whereas opposed the secular community would have gone down like by half.
And compared to suicide rates.
And also, well, that's a different topic of it, I bet. But no, I do think that humans, like what Brass said, I do think we do have kind of like a natural inclination for religiosity. After all, every society had a religion up until about the 20th century and whatnot. And if you want to go back earlier, I mean, the French Revolution happened and they tried to purge religion, but were not successful. Anything else to say? Or?
Just move on.
All right, let's go.
I was going to say something about
on these points. Check out the articles from Proceedings of the National Cognitive Science and the Social Cognitive Affective Neuroscience linked below.
Does this indoctrination lead to lower education? I don't know how she would correlate religiosity and lower education. The effects of education on America's religious practices, beliefs, and affiliations by Philip Showalter. Christians with college degrees are more likely to attend church or never have been to college. They pray at the same difference as them stating their belief in God is absolutely certain. Overall, that high school Christians and college educations, they found that they are roughly equal in religious and lower education goes, it doesn't really correlate.
Shown that educational attainment among the religious varies significantly depending on the religion and the region of the world you are in. Philosophers of old and many religious people think that religion is the underlying basis of social order. Unfortunately for all, society shows us otherwise. There is a proven correlation between not only religion, but religion and a lot of societal issues, and many studies all over the world. Highly secularized countries tend to fare better in terms of crime rates, prosperity, equality, freedom, rights, humans' rights, educational attainment, and life expectancy. An article in the Evolutionary Psychology Journal by Gregory Paul explains how studies based on 25 separate measures, live, abortion, teen pregnancy, STDs, unemployment, and poverty, have shown that the countries dysfunction are also the most secular, and those with the highest rates of social dysfunction are the most religious, as measured by self-professed belief, habits of prayer, and the like. According to the UN's...
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop it there. What do you guys have to say?
Honey, take a trip to China and North Korea. See how you fare there.
This really comes down to the whole Phil Zuckerman argument, and they make false correlations here. Places like Austria and Switzerland are highly religious but have notoriously low corruption, less violent crimes, etc. And they have even less murder rates than New Zealand, Denmark, and Sweden. Also, less religious places like Estonia, Latvia, and North Korea have high murder rates. Estonia has the lowest percentage of believers in other countries in Europe, but has a higher murder rate.
Well, here's
what I was going to say. Well, let me get my thought across, and then I'll let you guys continue. The thing of it is that I've seen a lot of those so-called studies too. They oftentimes measure, because there's so many different countries out there, like that are more secular, and but they also have smaller populations. So if you take all the Nordic countries and combine them into one, they're instantly invalidated just by North Korea alone.
China.
Because North Korea is, like you said, has a high homicide rate. It's impoverished and it's a totalitarian state, but it's also officially an atheistic state. And yes, it is an atheistic state.
Yeah, then they're going to think they worship their dictator like a deity, but they don't. It's a cult of personality, and cult of personalities do not count as religious belief.
Well, Kim Il-sung,
and also you have to take into consideration that a lot of these places, they have help from the U.S. government for their military. So yeah, they can afford to, have a little bit more luxury because they don't have to do with their military.
There's also they like to brag that there's less crime, but there's still crime, nonetheless.
Well, but here's the thing. What was I going to say? Let me get this across. Kim Il-sung, who was the first leader of North Korea, he said that they could not build a communist society along with the religious, so they had to be purged. But to go back to that other thing, what you're saying about crime, they say there's less of it, therefore it's better. But like I said, what I'm talking about is populations. Most of the quote unquote secular populations are concentrated not even in Europe, but in China, where, like you said, it's a totalitarian state, basically.
And there's also correlation between ice cream sales and murder rates in LA.
Oh, really? But
yeah,
also,
I know. I know if I kill someone, the first thing I want to do is get some ice cream.
Well, and also, and what these things also, what they're spouting also doesn't take into the fact that there's many studies that look at individual religiosity, and it shows the exact opposite. I'll link those studies too, because yeah, it's one thing where you could take a secular country and say, oh, it's better, and a religious country and say, oh, it's a crapple, but how does that matter for individuals and whatnot? Basically, a problem I have here.
It also goes into intrinsic religiosity versus extrinsic religiosity they can have very vast different results when you compare them. Like, for example, an intrinsic religiosity is someone that considers their religion their means, while an extrinsically religious person considers their religion a means to an end.
And it's
so
Christian.
Basically an intrinsically religious person will be someone that, they truly do believe in their religion and that is their main thing. While extrinsic religiosity is someone that's maybe using religion to get something out of it, like a social order, or, to go out and meet people.
And as far as Europe goes, it was previously Christian countries that allowed atheist propaganda to flourish. Whereas
I was going to do that.
Whereas in Muslim countries, they'll deny you the right to be anything but a Muslim.
Well, and I was going to say too is that secularism is actually a relatively new phenomenon in mostly, like the Nordic countries, for example, because I was looking at the research and it showed that, up until the 1980s, Sweden was very religious. The church, didn't start declining until the 1980s, and it wasn't until 2000 when the Church of Sweden was de-established as a state church. So, yeah, I think that's a little premature.
Well, yeah, and it's another thing to say, like, all these countries had low crime rates and low corruptions before they became atheistic. So, really, I don't think anything has to do with their religiosity here.
Well, it's a large body of research that shows that secularism is actually contributing to the decline of, like, the economic powerhouse of Europe. Because there's an article from The Economist by a gentleman named Niall Ferguson, and the article is called "The Atheist Sloth Ethic," and he points out that in the more quote unquote secular countries, they're also much more lazier, that they're not really economically contributing anything. So, yeah, I think this is kind of premature to say that, secularism is causing, wealth and prosperity. Also, another thing I want to mention, too, is that you see a huge rift in religiosity between continental Western Europe and the United States of America. And I think, personally, the reason why that is because the difference in attitude toward religion by the two revolutions, the American Revolution and the French Revolution. The American Revolution was much more friendly to religion, although it did establish separation of church and state. John Adams said that our Constitution is meant only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other, unquote. But the French Revolution attempted to quote unquote de-Christianize the country, and they had a violent campaign known as the de-Christianization of France. And they butchered priests and killed believers and whatnot. And eventually, these French revolutionary ideals spread throughout continental Western Europe. So that's why I think there's a huge rift in religiosity between Western Europe and continental Western Europe and the United States of America. You guys have anything else to say?
Nah.
Yep.
All right. Okay.
Study on homicide. Of the 10 nations with the highest homicide rates, all are very religious. Of the nations with the lowest homicide rates, nearly all are very secular, with 7 ranking among the least religious nations. By vision of humanity, each and most peaceful nations is also among the most secular, least God-believing countries are extremely religious. Save the Children Foundation publishes an annual Mothers Index, wherein they rank the best and worst many factors, including safety, education, employment, and other factors. The best are always the most secular, and the worst are always the most devout. Of preventable diseases are poor, uneducated, highly religious countries. Gallup surveyed 100 to determine religiosity worldwide. In nearly all countries which claim lives, the standard of living is extremely poor and low education. In these countries, religion plays a more functional role. Unfortunately, it does nothing to help bring their people an escape from reality. Psychology.
All right, you guys got anything? You guys want to respond?
Hey, Barbie, look at the headlines from the Cold War. Who is causing all those problems? Militant anti-theistic communists.
Well, that's another thing too. I think she's not considering that most of these developing countries are pulling themselves out of the chaos of the Cold War.
She's being very selective in her studies.
Well, yeah, and if you want to talk about violence and peace and whatnot, the 20th century was much more atheistic and anti-religious and secular, but it was also much more war. There was much more warfare. There was much more conflicts going on at the same time, and compared to communist atrocities, ISIS is child's play. I was going to say, North Korea. I hate to say it, but North Korea actually makes ISIS look kind of sympathetic. I would rather live under ISIS control than North Korea or China even. With what they do to Falun Gong practitioners and whatnot. Yeah.
It's just, I've just been reading some of their Psychology Today stuff. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's the whole correlation, not causation thing, I can always get into it.
I was going to say, and that's also, not counting correlation does not equal causation, too.
Another thing is you have to take into consideration, they include places like highly religious places like, let's say, Africa, Yeah, the same people that have fought off violent, politicians who have survived multiple, wars and campaigns against them. Yeah, I wonder why they're in such bad shape.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of those African countries, when
and guess what? And you idiots are people that are taking advantage of their hardships in order to further a propagandic game of saying religion is the problem and ignoring the fact that these people are in pain because of the fact of stupid wars that some secular societies had put onto them.
I was going to say
it's all your fault. Stop believing in God.
Hold on, let me get this thought out. I read from the Daily Mail that the biggest contributor of weapons to ISIS was not the United States, as previously thought, but was actually the People's Republic of China. So it's like, okay, that's kind of interesting how this atheist state is contributing to religious conflict just so that they can further their influence. So.
Yeah, it's just really stupid stuff here.
Yeah, again, I mean, like I said, I would talk about, correlation does not equal causation and whatnot. Like I said, I think like I said, this is why I say that their secularity thesis is premature. I think in the next several decades, we're going to actually see more modernization that's going to coincide with religion and religious growth. So you guys want to move on, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go.
Viewed secular and found that they have low crime rates, high levels of involvement in community, political parties and volunteer groups, high levels of social trust. They successfully satisfy the basic needs of all citizens. They virtually eliminated child poverty. They have good public education and don't suffer from large income inequalities. Health expectancy is high, and most all citizens have health care. In the U.S., the least theistic states fare much better in societal health, including homicide rates, fatality rates. The highly religious states have twice to 4 of child abuse fatality rates than the most secular ones. The Organization for Cooperation and Development compiled a list based on studies of the states with life. They used information on various indicators: rates, obesity, diabetes rates, child abuse rates, educational attainment levels, unemployment rates, income levels, rates of STDs, teen pregnancy, etc., to determine the quality of life. And it clearly showed that and religious states have the poorest quality of life, while people with the best God-loving religious states. If removing...
All right, so you guys want to respond to that?
She's mainly judging that based on the South.
Based on what?
The negativities of religious way of life is mostly from the South.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like the deep South too, like Alabama and Mississippi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I haven't really gotten a chance to go into the study to see how valid it is or not. So, I mean, I can't really comment a whole lot on it.
Doesn't it just seem convenient that religion's the big bad boogeyman behind every bad thing?
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Correlation. I was going to say that again. Correlation does not equal causation.
Yeah, remember, ice cream sales as much as murder rates. And the amount of... and there's also a correlation between the amount of cheese consumption and the number of people who died tangled in their sheets.
Yeah, and also what I was going to say, too, we're not considering about the religious, how religion fares among, the people itself. There's all kinds of studies that suggest it is beneficial, and that's more of a direct causation than, just saying, oh, this state happens to be a shithole because it's religious, then, or, this state is prosperous because it's more secular. So, should we move on?
Yeah. Sure.
All right, let's go.
Religion from the equation caused a decline in society see that among these studies, but we don't. In fact, the opposite is true.
William James, a meta-analysis on the effects and contributions of public charter, and religious schools on student outcomes showed adjusting for socioeconomic factors, private religious highest level of academic achievement. They also have the greater racial harmony than public schools. So nation can lead to a greater academic success in studies.
First of all, the only real statistic we have to work with when determining performance of private schools versus religious schools is national, in which private schools do in fact come out on top. Keep in mind, private schools don't, and while a lot are, religion or God belief has little, if anything, to do with private schools over their public counterparts. Classes also, the student-to-teacher ratio 0.2 versus 16.1 students per teacher in public schools. There's a lot more individual attention at private schools. Another advantage that private schools have over public schools is that they are not under state supervision, diverse curriculum than a public school can. They also have more college preparatory and gifted studies classes. In addition, they tend to offer a much wider activity. Socioeconomic status is another significant schools an advantage over public schools. Private schools are allowed to pick pens. Public schools are not. So private schools can reject students.
And in Canada.
All right. So you guys want to respond? Hello?
Nothing really important.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true because
it also goes into that a lot of them. They'll say like it's not really about religion, but it's like what kind of God people believe in. You know, it says like people that believe in a forgiving God account for more violent crime than an unforgiving God. So, you know, take into that consideration.
There's only one God. It's just the question is which version of God.
Oh, and you know, like, and here's the thing about this school thing. I said, you know, if anything, that was what I said. I didn't make, like, I was saying that this is definitely, that, like, religion is definitely the cause of it. Because, you know, just, you know, you can't, I've used a meta-analysis in order to be more, you know, to have more of a good way. But I also made sure to word myself good and say, if anything, because, of course, it is a good possibility that religion is not a factor into this, and it could be other things like the things she mentioned.
Okay.
I was just simply bringing that as an alternative. I was just simply bringing it up. I was saying, if anything, you know, if you had the choice between a religious private school and a public school and just a charter school, you would more likely choose the religiously private school, because if you're going by academic success alone.
Right.
I wasn't saying like directly that means like, of course, that means religious people are, you know, I mean, that means religion is obviously the factor in it. I was just bringing it up as, you know, an if anything thing.
How far are we in the video?
We're almost done. We got about 2 minutes, or about 3 minutes here.
All right.
Can we move on?
Yeah. Gosh, this woman's painful.
See pretty much the same thing when it comes to Canada's discriminatory funding of Catholic schools in 3 provinces. Quote, at this point, Catholic schooling has become a part of the architecture of school choice in the province and initial stratification across publicly funded systems. Research from Scott Davies at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education has shown that children attending Catholic schools are more likely to have parents with post-secondary education. Data collection by the EQAO shows that in the GTAH, Catholic school boards have fewer students with special education needs and vastly fewer students whose first language learned at home. Quote, we also see that funding, when amounts to 2 separate school boards, drove much needed.
Yeah, with me personally, I perfectly agree that.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, there was.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I do agree that they should stop funding Catholic schools, but I also believe we should just start privatizing schools in general, because we keep funding all these schools, and there's no incentive for the schools to do better, and they just lower they just lower the curve and make people stupider because they lower expectations. But we know with private schools, another thing that goes into that is competition. Private schools have to compete with each other, and so there's more of an incentive, since there's money on the line, for them to get students to be better. There's not that incentive with public schools, because no matter how bad the public school does, it's always going to get government money regardless.
Right.
So I mean,
right. I agree, and that goes back into what kind of what I was saying, the rift in religiosity between continental Western Europe and the United States. The reason why I think we are much more religious countries, because we never had this is one of the reasons, is because we never had a state church like many of those European countries did, and so there isn't this huge apathy towards it.
I thought she was going to get into the creationism being taught in schools for a second. I'm against that also.
Here's how I believe it. I believe, it shouldn't be publicly funded either way. Now, if it's privately funded, they do it, that's private, then that's on them, because they'll end up having to compete with each other over it. And if they can't compete, they'll end up having to go out of business.
Right. Well, we should move on. So let's try to get this out of the way. Ready? All right, let's go.
KC also makes the ideas, which is a vague objection.
Yeah, don't line up with reality and promote bigotry, discrimination, self-loathing, and hatred towards people outside of their group. Many Christians literally walk around with a torture device in the form of a necklace, and go on about how they needed a human sacrifice to wash away. They're promoting the idea that vicarious redemption. Those are bad ideas.
Mike,
familiar with these sorts of bad ideas.
What exactly is?
Do you see his quip there? Or his, sly little fucking jab at you guys?
Which, I don't see it.
Oh, like he said that red pill religion is promotes bad ideas and whatnot.
So does he.
Yeah.
Yep. Anti-theism is a worst idea. Red pill just gives back what it gets.
And seeing how you're friends with guys like Richard Carrier, it seems like you know a lot about bad ideas yourself, Mike. So yeah, you have no fucking business going after my friends.
I recommended he interview Tim O'Neill, and he just ignored me.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, I kind of like Godless Cranium, but when he was just ranting there, he sounded like a stereotypical, 2008, internet atheist. Oh, religion promotes this and bad ideas and bigotry, and that's why we have to fight it. I mean,
I don't know. Even a fan of his said that he's a lot less open-minded than he was half a year ago.
Who, Cranium? Cranium?
Yeah, Cranium.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
That's what anti-theism ultimately does to you. It drains you.
Just like feminism.
Well, and I think certain anti-religious views are intolerant as well. I mean, of course they're saying I'm performing whataboutism, but I like I said, I don't view any kind of religious wrongdoing as any more unique than any non-religious or anti-religious or irreligious wrongdoing. So maybe that's just the difference in philosophy or worldviews there. So whatever, I guess. Let's move on. You guys got anything else to say, or?
Oh,
no, it's good.
I just wasn't expecting that. Like guilt by association much?
Well, I mean, another thing is he goes into how it teaches vicarious punishment is a tradition of Christianity, where you're punished for someone else's actions. Yeah, apparently, I've already answered that kind of question in my response to the non sequitur show, where I go into the whole the penal substitution. But you don't want to go with theology with anti-theists, because their theology level tends to be around the same level as Ken Ham is. They're just as knowledgeable on theology as Ken Ham is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we move on now?
Let's move on.
All right, let's go.
Is a bad idea that doesn't conform to an already assumed conclusion, or is it promoting ideas that are contradicting all known evidence? I don't need to say how the first one is stupid. And if it is, then with all the atheists, flat earthers, and religious figure mythicists, like the atheist community is immune from having bad idea context.
And no one said that atheists can't hold bad ideas or that they're immune to conspiracy theories, etc. Again, you're spouting whataboutery, as if it's a good argument. Just holding bad ideas doesn't excuse the bad ideas found in religion. Hold bad ideas and acknowledge that other bad ideas exist. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you, Kaitlyn, for helping me with this video. I've been channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please check them out.
Let's stop there. All right, so this is the final.
Yeah. And I never said you could not, I was merely bringing it up as a point that, I don't find anything unique in religion when it comes to bad ideas. And, and I said, because, really, they went after me in the comment section where I seriously used, atheist flat earthers or atheist, historical, religious figure mythicist groups. I could have really used anything. I could have used atheists that believe in tarot cards, atheists that believe in ghosts. I could have used any of them. But, the thing is, I use those because they're modern. They're more modern. And the thing is oh,
go ahead.
The thing is I always tended to just, I was merely just pointing it out. I was saying that they're just not immune to it. I wasn't saying that, I was just merely pointing out that it's not it's something that's completely evident to religion. It can be, even without religion, it's still going to be there. And there's no evidence to show that with more secularism, less bad ideas are going to come out of it.
Right. And can that really even be considered a whataboutism at that point? At whataboutism, as I understand it, because I dealt with a lot of Stalin apologists back in in 2014. People who think, Stalin didn't murder, as many people, and he did more good and stuff like that. But basically, what about bringing up, if you bring up an atrocity and you say, in response, you say, oh, what about this other atrocity? That's not exactly what you were doing, right, Brass? Because
no, I was merely pointing out, there's nothing unique about it. I don't deny that religion has some bad ideas, but I'd say that that's also the same with secular ideas, and I have no reason to believe that with or without religion we would have any more or less bad ideas than we currently have. In fact, atheists rag so much on how the internet has made so much information available that it's easier to get away from religion now than ever before. But on the same hand, they have to acknowledge that with the internet, things like flat eartherism has also propagated, along with conspiracy theorists of all other sorts.
And it's not really whataboutism if you acknowledge if you acknowledge the Inquisition is wrong. Yeah, that's not really whataboutism if you acknowledge the Inquisition is wrong, but you bring up, say, the French Revolution's de-Christianization campaign, which was infinitely more violent. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not saying you can't speak about it, about both. I'm just merely saying that they're not unique. And I don't really see any reason to believe why they would, that the number of bad ideas would decrease with secularism, seeing how, secular humanism has never been tried as a society before.
Let's be honest.
It could go worse or it could be better.
Let's be
but
honest.
we simply have no current society on us that, where we can say it failed on its merits.
Do you think loving your enemy is a bad idea?
Well, if he has a gun to my head, then I would assume yes.
It's the same.
Well, you didn't hear.
Do what?
But, another funny thing is he put out the whole cross as a torture device. Yes, Christians are very well aware of the fact that that was what killed their savior. But they consider, how a symbol that can mean one thing can have other meanings to it. Like, for example, the peace sign, actually, wait, no, better, the swastika. In some places, we obviously interpret the swastika to mean Hitler and evil, but I think, in Hindu cultures, they have a swastika too, and it means peace and love. So, right, and so, yeah, while a cross can mean one thing, aka being a torture device, it can also mean other things, and it can be a meaning of, of salvation. Now, I don't agree. I don't agree with Christians on it, but I'm just saying a symbol can mean multiple things.
Many atheists use an atom, which, entire cities, which is worse.
Somewhere the cross upside down, unaware that was a symbol for Peter, since he was crucified upside down.
Right. So, and like you said with the swastika, it has different meanings. The swastika was originally a symbol of peace until it was appropriated in the 30s by the German Nazis.
Hell,
any other final thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm pretty good. I just, I wanted to do this video on my channel, but later on down the road. But I'm sort of glad maybe we can just get this out there now, so maybe I don't have to worry about it later on.
Yeah.
But whatever.
For my crappy computer and how bad the audio is and whatnot. Yeah. I'm 10 years technologically behind, so.
If you ever get to doing this, bring Inspiring Philosophy with you. He actually brings studies, unlike them.
Here's the thing to my audience, whoever's watching.
Well, here's the thing. Wait. I'll give them credit. They did bring studies to this, so
Yeah.
I will get on. I will get on you for that, Engine. They did bring studies.
Yeah, I'm talking.
I don't agree with the conclusion. I don't agree with the conclusion. All right, you go.
I'm talking about generally. Go ahead.
All right. I was just saying, I was just saying in this specific circumstance, they did bring studies. I don't agree with their conclusions, but I can't deny that they didn't present them.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And, I'll link...
But it's very convenient how it supports their biases.
Well, they were doing it in response to me, so of course they're going to have to put counter examples. So I'm not really mad at them for that.
Nah.
Problem too is just how much they cherry pick the evidence to, come to their conclusion and, spout out their, I guess you could say worldviews. That's, I guess. So,
it's not worldview, it's just like a belief.
Yeah, exactly. But this has been the Russian bot program. I am Comrade Dmitry, broadcast down Soviet ghetto in the middle of nowhere. My computer is a testament to my technological backwardsness, so you'll just have to bear with that until the Russian bot gets more rubles from the Kremlin to invest in a computer. So I am the Russian. This is and I say, "Das Vidanya," comrades.